this happen. I've been praying and prepping for a really long time for a big change in my life, and I feel very confident that this is what I've been praying for, and this is where God wants me. So I will be continuing not only my CrossFit journey, but also my walk through the artist way. So please be ready for another video. I will be posting another video soon, but in the meantime, we made it and we're back. Hi. I have so much to catch you up on. So, obviously, it's been a minute since my last video. I had every intention of making an Artist Way video before this point, but as it turns out, starting over in a new state is not as easy as I had hoped. Don't get me wrong, it's been great, but there's been a lot to get figured out. I moved in, got settled, and I took a day or two to rest. A day or two turned into a week or two, and then a week or two turned into many, many weeks. I sort of got addicted to rest. I guess I had a lot to catch up on. But in that rest, I still created a game plan for myself on how to move forward. The problem was, because I was addicted to rest, I kept pushing it back. First, it was, let me get my room set up. And then it was, let me get my feet settled at a new job. And then I was like, but I've got a couple of weeks until my birthday trip to Texas. I'll just wait until after that. Seeing my friends and family made me remember what I left behind. And now I'm overthinking the move. And I got back and I got cast in a short film, and I grew a beard for the short film. And I was like, I don't want to do a video with a beard. Then my hair got really long and I needed a haircut. Basically, I'm an overthinker. But in that overthinking, I realized that I'm often too hard on myself, and I was kind of kicking myself for not doing these videos. And I've decided to show myself a little bit of grace. But that's part of the journey, is that every journey looks different. So what if I've got to start back over at chapter 1? It's my journey, and I'm gonna do it. So we're back. We're doing the YouTube thing again. And we're also realizing that this is what my days off will look like for the next 3 months. We're going to get into the meat of the video in just a second, but first, a little life update. First of all, like I just mentioned, I got a job. After a couple of weeks of job searching and some interviews that just didn't go anywhere, I got a lead at a little hotel bar called the Trilith Guest House. Now, I'm not from Georgia, but I have heard the name Trilith before. And to my knowledge, Trilith is a major studio here in the Atlanta, Georgia area. And a guest house is usually where the cast and production stays when they're shooting a movie. So based on the name alone, I was pretty excited. When I moved into this house, I was told I would be living near most of the major studios. Assembly, Shadowbox, Tyler Perry, which is true. Tyler Perry is basically around the corner. But Trilith is another major studio. So when I looked up Trilith Guest House and it showed it to be an hour south of where I live, it must not be connected to the studio. Furthermore, the guest house was in this really large commercialized area that was the size of a town, and the town was labeled Trilith. So in my head, Trilith must be a town in Georgia, and the studio just borrowed its name. The studio's got to be somewhere else. But I drove to the interview, and much to my surprise, I pull up to massive sound stages, gated studio entrances, and a huge water tower bearing the logo of Trilith Studios. Now, if you don't know Trilith Studios was originally Pinewood Studios Atlanta. Pinewood Studios UK is responsible for some of the biggest films in film history. We're talking Star Wars, Tim Burton's Batman, the original Superman films, James Bond, Harry Potter. And this is that studio, but in Atlanta. They were bought out right before COVID by Trilith Studios, but Trilith Studios is still the home to a lot of Marvel films, now the DC films, as well as a lot of Netflix films. And here I am, working right across the street. I have no other explanation for this other than God. When I planned to move to Atlanta, never did I think I would end up working on a studio lot, literally walking distance from my dream. I was at the end of my rope as far as jobs go. I was willing to accept just about anything at this point just so I could start paying bills. But here I am working at a four-diamond hotel, constantly interacting with industry professionals in my dream industry. It's nothing but God. The job itself isn't all sunshine and rainbows. I mean, it's still the service industry. But even on the worst days, as I'm driving into work and I drive past those studios, I look at them and I say, that's the goal. That's the dream. Everything else I'm about to do for the next 8 hours is temporary, but that's what I'm working for. And I think that's really cool. I've made a few connections so far, nothing super substantial, mostly just really cool people that are understanding and supportive of why I moved here, which honestly is so refreshing. But the best connection I've made so far is actually a guy I used to work with at the guest house. He's since moved on to another restaurant, but in talking to him, I found out that he's a photographer and a personal trainer. Perfect for what I need in the next steps of my career. So we've come up with a game plan. We're working out together, we're losing weight, we're grinding, and here in a month or so when I'm ready, we'll take new headshots. And those headshots will be what I use to submit to agencies. I also got a lot of really great auditions when I first moved here. The first week that I really started submitting again, I got 11 auditions in 1 week, which was more auditions than I've gotten in 3 years in Texas. I booked 4, but 3 of the 4 didn't actually pan out. They just didn't happen. So I only ended up on 1 set, but that's okay. It was a good experience. It was a lot of fun, and I'll take what I can get. Winter is coming, and that tends to be a slower season for the industry, but that's okay because that gives me time to work on myself and get myself where I need to be when the industry picks up again. I'm also finally back in classes. I did some research and I found a really great studio north of Atlanta. Been around for 27 years. The instructor of the class has been in the industry for 50, and I had to audition to get into the class, which was a good sign. I did my audition and I graciously accepted their offer to place me in the advanced screen study course, which I was very humbled by. I'm so excited to get into these classes, make some new connections, fine-tune my skills, and maybe get a lead on an agent in the area. So I finally feel settled in Atlanta. And now that everything is in place, it's time for me to get back into the artist way. I was afraid I wouldn't get much out of rereading chapters that I had just read so recently, but everything that's changed in the last few months and this new perspective on life really changed what I pulled from these chapters, and boy do I have notes. So let's get into it. The first time I read chapter 1 of The Artist Way, I took barely even a full page of notes. This time when I read it, I took almost 3 pages of notes. I'm excited. As I was rereading this chapter, I found a different through line. The through line to me seems to be this idea of fear and overcoming fear and stepping out of the boxes that are created when you live in fear. This chapter is titled Recovering a Sense of Safety, which I think is so funny for the through line that I found in this chapter. Because generally you think of safety as what's comfortable, but fear is what's uncomfortable. And when you step out of the comfortable into fear, it doesn't always feel safe. But what she's teaching you is that there is safety in trying, there is safety in trusting the instincts within you that seem contradictory to what the world tells you you should do. And that's where it plays into this idea of the shadow artists that she talks about. She says shadow artists are created when support is lacking and doubt takes hold. Poor support can stunt your growth as a creative. Children are often urged into thinking of the arts as creative fluff around the edges of real life. I'm not going to say that I had poor support growing up, but I definitely heard that a lot growing up, that the arts are extra. They're not necessity. But this last year, as my living situation changed so much, I learned a lot about what is required to feel happy. And I wrote here, I said, security, necessities, people, and enjoying what you do is happiness. And I think that last part is especially important. Like, yes, security is necessary. Your basic needs, like food and a place to sleep, is necessary. People is so, so important. And that's another thing that she talks about in this. but enjoying what you do. If you have all of those things, but you're spending 40 hours a week doing something you hate, you're just wasting your time. I don't know why anyone would commit to that. And that's kind of where I am in my journey right now, is realizing that time is so short and we don't have enough time in our lives to spend it not being happy, or at least not trying to achieve happiness. She says one of our chief needs as a creative being is support. Seek out good support. It's so important to have people in your life that care about you, believe in you, and want to support you. That becomes your gas and your gas tank. That is what keeps you going, because when you can't believe in yourself, someone else is believing in you. And oftentimes, us believing in ourselves is not enough. That's not enough to push us out of that comfort zone, push us into the unknown. Into the unknown. Sorry. Sometimes we need good support to get us to that point, and bad support can actually hold us in that box. People that tell you that your passions, your creative endeavors are just extra in life, simply don't be around those people, because not everybody is created the same way. We all have different desires, we all have different interests, we all have different passions. That's what makes us human, and that's what makes humanity so beautiful. So someone who doesn't understand your creative endeavors is completely fine, but someone who wants to squash that and make them just like you, make them just as miserable as you are, or just as successful as they are, it's simply not valid. What you need as a creative person is so different than what a business executive needs. Your ideas of success are completely different. She also wrote, shadow artists are to be found shadowing declared artists. Artists love other artists. Shadow artists are gravitating to their rightful tribe, but cannot yet claim their birthright. And I wrote off to the side of that, encourage other artists. And then she quotes, often audacity, not talent, is what makes one person an artist and another a shadow artist, which I love this, because if there's one thing that I've learned to be true about the industry, is it's not always about how talented you are. It's about how far you're willing to go and the places you're willing to put yourself in. It's audacity. It's the people you're willing to talk to. It's the risks you're willing to take. And that's exactly what she's saying, is sometimes the most creative person in the room is silent in the corner because they don't have the audacity to not only step out in creativity, but the audacity to trust themselves. She included a quote by Joseph Chilton Pierce in this chapter that says, to live a creative life, we must lose our fear of being wrong. I also quoted her for saying, it takes nurturing to make an artist. Beating yourself up only reinforces your shadow artist. It reinforces those doubts. It reinforces those chains, that box that you're in. She says, learn to take your creative self seriously. Learning to play is very hard work. If you were raised to the role of shadow artist, you need to work consciously to dismantle it. Oftentimes we have these feelings of, well, I am too an artist, and the world will challenge you and say, how do you know? You don't always know. Sometimes it's just a feelings, an urge. There maybe isn't real proof, but you know it to be true. Have the audacity to step out and try it. Prove the world wrong. I think if more people learned this and learned how to step out in creativity and take those risks, we would have an exponentially more creative world. We are creative beings created by a creative God. That's what it means to be made in his image. That and other things. But as a creative person, that's what it means to me. I give back my creativity. I honor God in being a creative person. And I think we're all creative beings. We just have to learn to step out and trust that creativity and take those risks. I wrote down another quote from her. It says, much fear of our own creativity is fear of the unknown. And then I wrote my own notes and I said, what will happen if you do? The better question is, what will happen if you don't? And which is worse? You can't stand still, you have to jump. And that reminds me, a couple years ago, my family took a vacation. I don't remember exactly where we were, but there was a river and some cliffs on either side of the river. And originally we were just going to swim, but I saw these guys climbing to the top of the cliff, jumping off into the water. It was probably a 30-foot cliff at least. It was tall. It was intimidating. It was big. But I knew it was something that I wanted to try. It was scary, but I knew if I didn't, I would always look back and wonder how fun would it have been if I had just jumped. And so I climbed to the top of the cliff, stood on the edge, and it was intimidating. You had to jump forward off this cliff, otherwise you were going to land in rocks and really not be okay. My legs were shaking. I was not ready to jump. But all of these people down below, all of these people who I had told, I'm going to jump, they're now watching me. They're expecting me to jump. I got to do it. Because if I don't, I'm living in this box of fear. And so, legs shaking, I jump off the cliff, and it felt like time stopped. But then I hit the water, I went under, I came back up, and I was okay. And guess what? I looked back and I said, that was really fun. I'm going to go do it again. And that's kind of where I'm at in my career. Is I'm at a point where I could have chosen to stay home, but I chose to jump. I chose to move to Georgia. And another thing she writes is that recovering from your shadow artist is like a child learning to walk. Mistakes are necessary. Stumbles are normal. These are baby steps. Progress, not perfection, is what we should be asking of ourselves every day. You can't have stumbles. You can't have mistakes without taking those risks. A baby is never going to walk unless you let it take those risks. I actually have a scar somewhere in this area from when I was learning to walk. I was learning to walk and I tripped or fell or lost my balance or whatever, and I hit the edge of the fireplace and I busted my eye open. My parents could have said, oh no, we're not going to let him walk anymore. It's too scary. It's too dangerous. But what sense does that make? A child has to learn to walk. Your creative child has to learn to walk. You have to take those risks. You have to be willing to hit a few bumps along the way. You have to be willing to look over the edge of the cliff and say, if I don't fully commit to this, I'm going to hit the rocks. And then you got to jump. You got to commit to it. And right now, that has me feeling so passionate about where I am in my career because I have jumped. I have committed to it. And I'm here. The last thing I wrote about this chapter is that if we become 1/10 as good at positive self-talk as we are at negative self-talk, we will notice an enormous change. And I think that's so powerful and so true. Same as before, my favorite activity from this chapter was the affirmations, the blurts, and the mantra you write about yourself that you believe to be true or that you know to be true. This time, the sentence that I chose was, I, Caden, am a talented and God-validated individual, well-equipped to stand out in a crowded industry. Originally, I wrote, I, Caden, am a talented and likable individual. But then I realized if I unshackle myself from what other people think about me, if I unshackle myself from wanting to be liked by them, and remember that God, who gave me this creativity, already doesn't just like me, he loves me. And he's the one who's going to provide these opportunities. He's the one that's going to provide whatever success I get in this career. That's validation. I'm not likable. Sure, maybe I am likable. But what's more important is that I'm God validated. And I'm well equipped because of that to stand out in a crowded industry. And maybe that sounds arrogant to repeat to myself over and over, but it's what I need to keep going, to keep taking those risks. That those words fuel me right now. And it's what I'm reminding myself. I'm trying not to put so much focus on what I can give, but what God can give through me. Because at this point, it's not about what I can do. God brought me here. God put me at Trilith. God provided this house that is affordable and filled with Christian roommates. I'm living part of my dream right now because of what God has provided for me. And I have to keep honoring and acknowledging him through that. Otherwise, none of this has any depth or gravity to it because it's all what I did. And that's just not worth it to me at the end of the life. There's no sustainability to that. You can't encourage someone by saying, oh, look what I did. You can encourage someone by saying, look what God did through me. Because God did that through me, he can do that through you. And what's most important to me right now is looking back years from now and encouraging someone, whoever it may be, to also chase their dream. You can do it because I did it. And I did it because God empowered me to do it. And God can empower you too. Same as before, I can't really share too much of my morning pages or more of my personal notes from the chapter, but I want to keep documenting my takeaways from this. I'm excited to be back in this book. There's so much that has happened already, and there's so much more to come. And I'm excited to see where my journey goes from here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for coming back to these videos, and I can't wait for the next one. See you soon.